welcome everybody. Tonight's lake-friendly landscaping presentation is brought to you by the Highland Lake Leadership Team, which is probably the best kept secret in Windham and Falmouth. The Highland Lake Leadership Team is an official committee of both towns of Windham and Falmouth, and was initiated by the Highland Lake Association back in 2018-19 when we were struggling with some blooms on the lake. And it was as we were looking at moving forward to do a full watershed survey, we looked at some of the prior surveys and realized that some of the earlier plans had suggested that there'd be routine meetings between the towns of Windham and Falmouth and some outside groups to help us out, including the DEP and the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District. So we ended up actually following through this time and working with the town managers in the two towns, formed the Highland Lake Leadership Team. And it's a pretty powerful committee. Both town managers are participants in this committee, as well as town council members. So both towns have been terrific in helping us out. And this is one of the first public examples of things that we've been able to accomplish. So tonight, we're going to be talking about, why don't you move to the next slide, please? Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Shoreland Zone. And for those who can see on your screen, I can't, but the Shoreland Zone is really 75 feet from a stream and 250 feet from a 10-acre water body or larger. And this is the area that we're most concerned about right now in being able to prevent erosion from happening. And our speaker tonight, Sarah Boudreau from Winslow Farms, will go into a lot more detail about exactly the things that you can do. And when we're looking at the distances from streams or lakes, you need to recognize that it's not the angle. You don't measure the distance on an angle, it's the horizontal distance. If you look at the slide, you can see that there's a difference between the two. So it'll be longer if you measure it at an angle, but if you measure the horizontal distance, that's where the 75 feet or 250 feet comes from. So with that, I'd like to welcome Sarah Boudreau to come up and get into a lot of details on the kind of plants that would make a lot of sense in the Shoreland Zone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is lovely. Thank you for having me. Just so you know, I do not live on a lake, so I know a lot about plants, however. So, first thing we're going to talk about, though, is, let's see, did you know that non-point source pollution, that is some keywords that everyone in the world should know about how things get into water, whether it's the ocean or lakes. And we're talking about Highland Lake. So this is very important to all of you, I know. And non-point source pollution are pollutants that come from soil, fertilizers, pesticides, even pet waste, and are basically washed into the water through hard surfaces or impermeable surfaces, as we say. It could be roofs, it could be driveways, it could be sidewalks. And this includes all four seasons. And so we can't exclude all the de-icing and salt and all of those things that come from plowing the roads and driveways, etc. But so it's really important, obviously, then to think about how this runs down, where it goes, and so on. But I have some beautiful photographs that I don't know if you know Pat Ioni. She shared these with me, and she does live on the lake. And what I want, or let me put it this way, one of the things I hope you will all think about are some of the creatures that live in the environment, in the ecosystem. We're going to talk about ecosystems because that's very important. And here are some of them. I don't know if you can see, but there's actually a frog on the log there. Frog on a log. That's that's what I should have called this slide. But anyway, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And of course, the amazing creatures. And I included the dog because I think it's important, because one of the things I think that is really important for people is to enjoy life. And I think if people love dogs, then we want to make sure that everything about them is beneficial to the lake. And having fun with your dogs at the lake, I think, is really important. So, okay, and next, yeah. So what can we do? What do we do? All right. Some people are just coming in, so I'll just go a little more slowly. But one of the things we need to think about is 3 ways to a healthy water quality. And this slide, I hope you all can read it, but what's really important is in bold, and it's to minimize runoff. And we just talked about that. And runoff picks up pollutants as it goes, downhill, basically. And the key to protecting is to minimize the hard surfaces that create the runoff. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And what we really want to do is try to eliminate pollutants at their source. And one of the best things you can do is avoid using fertilizers in the wrong way. We can discuss that at a later time. Definitely don't use pesticides and other chemicals. Soil erosion, as you can see in the photo, that's really important because soil itself can be damaging to lake water. Excuse me. And then also maintain your septic systems and pick up after your pet. So thank you. And then another way for healthy water quality is to capture and infiltrate. And this is to, as you can see on the top right, I hope you can tell, that's a rain barrel. You can actually capture water that way because it's running off the roof. And then if you can also see, there are some rain gardens and so on. And it's basically creating shoreline buffers. And that's a really important aspect here. So we can go to the next slide. And this is one that I just said, remember yardscaping. Quite a number of years ago, yardscaping was the buzzword for taking care of water, whether you were on the ocean or lakes or a river, a stream. But it's really important work. And it's still to this day, even though we probably don't use that phrase, it's really, really important. And it's really simple. It's really simple. And you can create an attractive yard while protecting the environment. And especially what you want to do, again, is minimize any reliance on, it says water, but fertilizers and pesticides especially, okay? That's really important. Okay, and to protect lakes and streams with buffers, I think you can see from the slides that preserving existing landscape is terrific. It's easy, right? And if you want a slope generally down to the water, use a winding path. That's really great. Like an S kind of curve. S for Sarah, that's my name. You can remember it that way. You don't want to mow to the water's edge because that creates another slick surface, which the grass itself, especially if it's mowed, is not the best thing for catching anything, to keeping it out of the water. And then create natural enhanced buffers. I mean, you can, I it's hard for me to read it, but you can enhance existing buffers is what it says. But I also wanted to mention a couple of things about yards and grass. And one of the things I think is that people really hopefully will understand is that grass really doesn't need to be fertilized at all. And I know this because I've never fertilized my lawn and it's green all the time, but we have a lot of marine clay at our farm, which is sort of a good thing and a bad thing. It holds the moisture enormously, but it's like, you know, rock when it's dried out. But anyway, so we use a lot of compost, we make our own, we also get it from other farms. But I happened to have gone back to school not that long ago and studied horticulture. And one of the things I had to take, and I sort of was like rolling my eyes, was what did they call it? I'm trying to think, lawn maintenance or something like that. And it was basically about grass and all things related to lawns. And what I was taught in school was that grass can only take up fertilizer in the fall. If you fertilize it in the summer, it does no good. It just either runs through the ground and out that way, or runs right off the surface, or anything like that. If you fertilize it in the spring with something like weed and feed, which is a pesticide, as well as a fertilizer, then it can't really take it up, because what it's doing is trying to grow, and it's not biologically helping the plant. So it can take up fertilizer in the fall, but you don't really need to fertilize grass at all in the fall. And grass is a plant that has evolved over millennia to dry out in the summer. That's, you know, what it does. So anyway, and just one other little tidbit of information about grass. I found this on a Google search that I did getting ready, and it says that fertilization spread on the surface encourages grass to grow shoots on the surface. And then in bold on the same search, it said fertilized grass has a harder time accessing water in the soil. Now that's critical. Water is the one thing that will make your grass green in the summertime. So if you fertilize it at all in the summer, it's only going to make it harder for the grass to absorb water. And it says this grass needs frequent watering. Soil compaction follows when fertilizer is applied. So it's really important, I think, to understand that it's really unnecessary. It's a waste of time, resources, and it hurts the lake. Okay, and now we're going to talk about buffers. And a natural buffer is the simplest and the least expensive. So you can't go wrong with those two things. So I think we're going to move on to, so let's talk about plants. Which plants are best? That's a really good question, because I think that it's really important that you think about the land that you're trying to landscape or change in some way, whether it's making it less wooded, or whether you just want some beautiful gardens to look at, so you look over them to see the water, or however you want to approach it. But what you want to think about is it well drained, or is there a depression where water settles? So those kinds of plants are going to be ones who can stand a little bit of wet soil and live and not die because the roots rot. So it depends. But one of the things that's really important, and that's why we're all here, is that you include native plants. And there are so many native plants here in Maine. I just happen to have with me, this is a little brochure called Native Plants. And it says right in the beginning that Maine is home to about 1,200 native plant species. So obviously we're not going to show you all 1,200 tonight, but we've chosen a few to show you. But there's so many really important things about having native plants incorporated into your landscape You can have other plants that aren't natives, that's fine. And there are a lot of plants, shrubs, trees, and perennials and ground covers that are lovely and are not invasive. That's fine. But we're going to go through ground covers, perennials, shrubs, trees, but if we can maybe go to the next slide. One of the things about native plants is, because remember the creatures, we talked about creatures and we saw a little tiny tree frog and a turtle and all those things, but also many of the creatures that are really, really important in an ecosystem are the insects. They do the pollinating. They're also food for other creatures that are really, really important in an ecosystem. And so a lot of the insects have evolved to eat native plants. And that's the only way they could live. And we're in the middle of what they call an insect apocalypse right now. And in part, it's because we have been using, I think, too many pesticides, insecticides. When we say pesticides in the business, that includes insecticides, herbicides, everything. So anyway, we've been using too many pesticides and it's a bad thing. But native plants have, all of them have attributes that are really good for the insects, and a lot of them have fruit and or leaves that either caterpillars eat or birds eat, and the insects that are the caterpillars that are on a leaf, you know, have evolved to create really interesting shapes of themselves so that they look like the leaf. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's all part of the ecosystem and it's all really important. So let's get into looking at some plants, if that's okay. Now, native plants generally need fewer inputs. I forgot, this is a really nice thing about native plants. And what you're looking at is sumac. And sometimes, and trust me, we have so much sumac on our property that sometimes it just makes me want to scream. But I happen to have it right near our deck, and that's where that picture was taken. And it was so beautiful with the snow on it. And where we are, we don't get as much pretty snow as we used to. But the sumac is wonderful food, especially for birds, and chickadees especially love it in the wintertime. It's really important for them. So that's why that's there. But we're going to start with some plants, and we're going to start with ground covers, which obviously grow low to the ground. They don't need to be mowed or trimmed generally, and they can be placed along paths, patios, and other places for low maintenance gardens. And let's move on to the first. Yeah. So what we're looking at is creeping phlox. And you've probably seen this plant many times and you think, oh, it's so pretty when it's blooming. It's wonderful. It comes in white, pinks, bicolor pinks, lavenders. And I think I look at the one on the right-hand side of the screen and it looks like the lavender, and then the pink one looks like it might have a touch of white in it. But anyway, they're beautiful. They really are. They're so reliable, hardy as can be. They stay low. The only thing you might have to do is to keep it in check a little bit. Love sun, it will grow on a rock practically. I mean, they're really hardy and they're one of the first things to bloom in the spring. They bloom when the daffodils are blooming, and they're gorgeous. This particular plant is really pretty. Now this one is a little bit more esoteric, I'd say. This one's called teaberry, or Gaultheria procumbens is the Latin name. And it's a ground cover as well. It will take shade, lots of shade, and it has the little red berries on it, hence the name teaberry. And it's lovely. I think you can eat it, but I'm not totally sure. I probably shouldn't be saying that. But we can go to the next one. Okay, so we're going to start looking at some herbaceous perennials. And perennials, you probably know, come in all shapes and sizes. And they do attract a lot of pollinators, and they add great color to anybody's garden. And they're wonderful to have around. And then they die back in the winter, which is lovely. So we can go on. This is one that called Virginia Bluebells, and it's Mertensia virginica. It says 16 to 20 inches tall. I have some, but it's not, it stays probably around a foot. And it does kind of seed itself. So, but that's what I want it to do, because I use it around hostas because I have some shady areas, and I love blue flowers. There's something about blue that just, I don't know. I think in another life, I had some blue flowers somewhere, but it's really beautiful. One thing that's really interesting about it is it's known as an ephemeral, which means that the foliage, which is very attractive, a little bit fuzzy, the foliage dies back. And I wish I could tell you exactly when, but I usually get so busy. But it's maybe July, it's gone. You won't even know it was there. But it's a beautiful early spring bloomer. Thanks. This is Marsh Marigold, and some of you may be familiar with this plant. This is really stunning. And as you can see, it makes quite a display if you have a lot of it growing. This is a wonderful plant for wet areas. And it will live on stream beds, river beds. It would be great by the lake, very close to the water. It will take a lot of moisture. I'm not sure I put it right, planted in the water, but it can be very close, and it can be in an area where you have, if you want to have a buffer that absorbs water, that's in a sort of a low area, that would be a great place for it. And it will take part shade, so it can have some sun. Doesn't have to be, in a forested area or something like that. And this is a lovely plant. This is Columbine, and it's Aquilegia canadensis. And this is it can be kind of small. It tends to seed itself. That's how it reproduces. I just saw one the other day in my garden. I thought I didn't have it anymore. And it's lovely. And hummingbirds, it comes out and the hummingbirds are out and they love it. It's really nice. And it's a really nice early plant for hummingbirds. So, and I think we can go to the next one. Oh, this is one of my all-time favorite plants. This is more of a midsummer bloomer. This is, the common name is butterfly weed. Escalius tuberosa is the Latin name, and it is a milkweed. It's about 2 feet tall. It will grow in a really blazing hot sun. In fact, it loves it in that kind of, environment. And monarch butterflies love this plant. They also love the weed milkweed, which I don't remember the Latin species name of at the moment, but I actually have a little bit of that in the same garden where I have some Escalius tuberosa. And I get a lot of monarch caterpillars and several chrysalises, and this is on a busy road. We're on Route 100. And I get so excited because there they are, and then they hatch and you're like, oh, I had a baby. One of the really important things to know about this plant, it is extremely slow to break ground in the spring. I have some, like I just mentioned, and I think it was just a few days ago that I saw it. I thought every year this happens, I think it's dead. It's not going to come back. Because it got too much road salt or whatever. But it's there. It's just slow. I think it's a very smart plant because it knows, oh, too cold. I'm not coming up yet. Next. And this is another favorite plant of mine, Black-eyed Susan. This is Rudbeckia hirta. There are several different species of Rudbeckia. There is one called Gold Sturm, it's S-T-U-R-M, G-O-L-D-S-T-U-R-M, that is considered the true perennial. This is a perennial, but it tends to seed itself. And it's a great meadow plant. Again, it's a summer bloomer, loves sun, and it also makes a fabulous cut flower. So I think anything that makes a good cut flower is worth growing. So anyway, and as you can see, it looks like it's in a kind of a meadow type setting on the side of the lake. So, and then this is Solomon seal. The one we're showing here has a little variegation on the edge of the leaf, and this is a plant that I grow in the shade, and I think it's the easiest, prettiest thing, and it's so attractive. It has its little flowers dangle from the nodes towards the ground, and it's lovely. It's a great shade plant. It does spread a little bit, easy to control, and it's beautiful. And sometimes I use it for filler in bouquets. So, okay, next. Okay, I'm going to say it again, another favorite. Okay, this is bee balm, which is also known as Monarda didyma. That's the Latin name. The height varies. There are many different cultivars of Monarda. The one we're looking at looks like it might be Jacob Klein, because Jacob Klein is a spectacular red variety. But by the way, cultivar actually means cultivated variety. That's where they got that name. It's a combination of the two words. But there are pink bee balms. There are, I think there's some that are white or nearly white. They're dark purple, many different colors. Hummingbirds love this plant, and it's so amazing to watch the hummingbirds come, and the flowers are so long tubes, and they can just, you know, balance in midair and get the nectar from the bee balm, and it's remarkable. This plant does spread, so it's another great meadow plant. It actually is pretty easy to keep control if you have it in, you know, a sort of a more formal garden setting, if you want to do a border with it or something. But again, it's really nice to have like flowers that bloom in the spring, flowers that bloom in the summer, different heights. Like this is tall, probably. I mean, it's 3 to 4 feet tall, and it does make a great cut flower. So, and this is a really interesting plant. It's one of its names is bugbane or black cohosh, and this is Cimicifuga racemosa. There is another type of Cimicifuga, another species that's darker and a little bit taller, but this is a lovely native plant for shade. And I wish the close-up, it shows you a little bit of what the plant looks like just as the blossoms are starting to open up. And they're like little alien ears, you know, little tubes that stick out with a little button ball on the end. And I have used that as a cut flower, and if you cut it when before it's opened, it stays in that little, you know, alien looking shape for quite a while before it actually then opens. But it's lovely when it's open too. It is used as a medicinal plant, and it is relatively easy to grow, and it's tall. I mean, when it's blooming, it's quite tall, but it's lovely. It has really nice green leaves and will take quite a bit of shade. So it's always nice to have some shade plants, especially ones that are tall. So, okay, we're moving on here. We're growing. And we're going to talk about some mid-story shrubs. And shrubs can do so many things. They can make shade for you in your yard. They can create a little shady spot. And I mean, many shrubs have food and habitat for birds and other animals. And it says you can mix a couple into a herbaceous perennial garden. And woody stems remain year-round for the most part. So, okay, first one we're looking at is the high bush blueberry. It's a fantastic plant. Love it, love it, love it. what we're seeing is the blueberry plant in the fall, because the leaves turn a spectacular red. There are many different varieties of high bush blueberry, which is Vaccinium corymbosum. And we grow a lot of these at our farm, and the ones that are the early varieties tend to be much bigger and have, like there's one that the University of Maine at Orono developed called Patriot, and the blueberries are, I mean, huge. And they're delicious. They're very sweet. Personally, if you want to freeze your berries, I feel like I want the smaller ones. So one of my personal favorites is Northland, which is a mid-season producer, and it has a much smaller berry. And then there's some that are late. They actually are much later in the season, but I would avoid those probably because we do have an invasive insect in Maine now, and it's the Asian fruit fly. And what happens is that the fruit fly will lay its eggs in the berry itself, and then you eat it and there are maggots in there. So that's not so great. So we stay away from the late season varieties. I know. Okay, we don't want those. Next. Now this is our beautiful plant, and one of its best times is in the winter. This is Ilex verticillata, and you've probably seen it, and it has these amazing berries that stay on the plant during the winter. In fact, a lot of times you'll go to a garden center or something, and there'll be these gorgeous red berry stems and dried, and that's what this is. It does grow naturally in forests. We have some at our farm, which we have a lot of woods there, and the bushes are, very tall, and sometimes they have tons of berries and sometimes they don't have very many. But there are many different cultivars, and the ones that you would buy in a garden center are most likely ones that are bred to have lots of winter interest. And that's what's really one of the big attributes of this bush. The leaves are lovely. They're green, sort of shiny. It's really easy to maintain. You really don't have to do much to it. But and one more thing about the blueberries. If you do want to grow blueberries, you want to make sure you have acidic soil. It really likes a low pH. And there's different ways to get that. One of the things we do is to use something called hollytone, which is a great fertilizer it also lowers the pH. And then if we still have to go a little further, we use, I think it's called granulated sulfur or something like that, but it's stuff that we order through MOFGA that's approved by Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners. But anyway, and then this is a type of sumac, which the Latin name is Rus tipina, and then in not parentheses, but asterisk, what are those? Apostrophes, whatever. Bale tiger is the name of this. And I included this because they happen to have a bush of this, and it was big, but it was in the fall, and it has this amazing color. It's up at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, where they have a lot of native plants. And if you have not been there, you should definitely go check it out. And fall is a great time because it's just amazing. But sumac is a native plant, and it has a lot of nutritional value in its seeds, and a lot of birds really like it. I just love the color of this. I thought it was spectacular. So, and then we're kind of going back in time here, but this is downy serviceberry, or M. lankier canadensis, which is an early spring bloomer. And we have a gorgeous one, and the one we have is kind of a trumpet shape to it. And I don't remember the cultivar. There are some cultivars. This is just the species, which is lovely and a little bit smaller, but covered with blossoms, as you can see, in the early spring. Then the leaves come out and it has berries on it, which birds love. And then the really good news is in the fall, it's spectacular. It's gorgeous, a beautiful fall color. And like I said, there are cultivars of this particular plant that are, for whatever reason, different sizes. Some are smaller. The one we have, like I said, is very trumpet shaped. We have to trim it a little bit, but just to keep it that shape. But it's really lovely and very easy. But I mean, I don't do anything to it other than just check the shape. And another beautiful early spring bloomer is Eastern Redbud, which is Cercis canadensis. It's a really, really pretty purpley pink blossom. And you can see it on the right as sort of something taller in the garden with different, I'm not sure if those are perennials or annuals, but I did not take that photo, but it's lovely, and it's a real standalone plant because it's so beautiful and the shape is beautiful. Again, it's kind of a trumpet shape, and it has really interesting leaves that are quite large, and in the fall it has really pretty color as well. So, and it's really interesting to see the blossoms come out in the spring because it takes a really long time. They're really slow to open, but it's beautiful. Okay, and the canopy. All right, we're going to go to some taller plants, and this is, do you know what this is? This is the state tree of Maine, the eastern white pine. So it is Pinostrobus, and it, as you know, probably know, that it can get very tall. And it'll grow in sun or shade. And one of the nice things about it is it can be trimmed up somewhat from the bottom, and you can actually kind of make it kind of a see-through plant. You don't want to trim it too much, but it needs its pine needles to photosynthesize. But it again is food for different animals and so on. And it's very stately, and it's a lovely, it really is a lovely plant. So, and we've got now sugar maple, which is Acer saccharum. And again, the mature plant is huge. You probably already know this, but it's really gorgeous when it's in the fall, and it's again really easy, very stately, and that's where we get our maple syrup. So you really can't go wrong with that. And last but not least, I think this might be the last one. Anyway, swamp white oak, which is an interesting oak tree, which is also tall, Quercus bicolor. Is that what it says? Yes.
Yeah.
And it will take a fairly moist area, which is unusual for an oak. So it's a nice addition to any kind of low lying, or, you know, when you want to have a buffer that, you know, absorbs the water because it's a little bit lower lying, that kind of thing. So, and okay, now we're going to have some fun. Let's build some buffers. As you can see, what's right there are just, it's grass right up to the lake practically, with some rocks. And next slide. Ta-da! And now we have some, I believe, butterfly weed and some creeping phlox and high bush blueberries behind them. So it looks beautiful, and that's what you want along the lake, is some protection so that those plants will do their job and keep things from going into the water. And then here we have a more shaded area, and there's some, I believe, some hosta growing there. And then we're going to add ferns, which are wonderful. They're beautiful. I love ferns. And we also have, I think it's teaberry on the left, and the Simsifuga on the right, which it's a little hard to see, but the Simsifuga is the bugbane, or the black cohosh, which has a very tall white flower, and the tea-berry is basically a ground cover, but you understand that, we're trying to show you that it can be lush and beautiful and environmentally friendly. So, and last but not least, and I think that's Marsh Marigold with some bee balm and more blueberries.
Yep.
Yes, so you cannot go wrong with those choices. And the people are happy. They're very happy in the photo. And I think, yeah, oh, there we go. And there's a list of some resources. And I think you all got some handouts which have a lot of information. And just so you know, I also wanted to show you a couple of at least this book in particular, which has my native plant. And this has so many different pictures of native plants. It's great, just a little brochure. And this is an older book, and it's called Bringing Nature Home. It's by Doug Tallamy, and it is a fantastic book. He's an entomologist. So that's his background. He teaches, I believe, at the University of Delaware. But anyway, I've seen him speak. He came to Maine Audubon. And what he encourages is that just use some native plants in your beautiful gardens. You don't have to take out what's there. Just add native plants in. And that's really a great way to, get food for the insects and have a healthier ecosystem, because everything's connected, whether it's, the water goes into a stream or goes into a river, and eventually it ends up in the lake. And so, but it's important that it's all working all the way through, all the way down. So I'm hoping that some of these resources will be helpful. There's a ton of information, and the Highland Lake Association has done a great job, and they have a great website. So, and then thanks to our supporters and Skillins, Broadway Gardens, and Allen Sterling and Lothrop, and Roosevelt Trail Landscape and Garden Center, and Winslow Farm, that's me, and thank you. So. Are there any questions? But
Yeah. If there are any questions, either online or from here in the audience, we'll be happy to take them. And yes, Kevin?
One of the things that before the ground cover is established, or even while it's being done, what do you recommend for like mulch for the plants?
wait, now I need a little more info.
Well, if it's existing grass, you saw a lot of those grass pictures, so.
You want to know how to get rid of the grass?
Yeah, and maintain the weeds and things.
Right.
Like that.
Well, if you want to create a garden, I will tell you from bitter personal experience, if you started out with grass, the best thing you can do is dig it up, either by hand, you can rototill it, but a really important thing is to edge it and then make sure you know where the edge is from there on, because grass likes to creep in to where you don't want it. And it's a lot of work to create something where grass has been, I will admit. But I find it really satisfying, and you can rototill, but then you need to take each clump and shake it out and, make a compost pile or something like that with it. But it's a process. And so I wouldn't try too big a space at any one time.
But not like mulch leaves, pine spills.
You can do that, but it's sometimes the grass just keeps growing.
It has to be done really thick.
Yeah. I mean, and people have tried, I've tried using cardboard and paper. But I'll be honest with you, what I ended up with was a ton, we created vole habitat. They were so happy. I mean, tunnels everywhere. And so they were destroying some of the plants right nearby that I didn't want to get hurt. And the mice, and so it's, yeah, it's a process.
So one of the things that we talked about at the beginning, before we get to the questions, is you can make your yard look really nice with some of the plants and buffers that we've talked about, but it's our interest is having everybody really understand how each of our homes contributes to pollutants getting to the lake. Certainly, there's issues with pesticides and fertilizer for sure, but when a new house goes in near the lake shore or stream side, there's about 10 times more phosphorus that washes off because of that than from a natural wooded setting. So by putting in buffers and by thinking about these things ahead of time, we can do something to significantly minimize the amount of phosphorus that's leaving the yard and getting into the water body. And it's not that any one place is bad, but on Highland Lake, we have about 300 houses right around the lake and 1,000 in the watershed. So everybody just has to, if everybody did a little bit, it could make a significant change in the amount of phosphorus and other materials making it to the lake. So at this point, I'm so pleased to have Sarah here and to give us some overview on the kinds of plants that you can put in. And if she explained from the low level ones that you want to be able to see over and still enjoy the lake, to the medium ones, and then the canopy. The canopy slows down the rain. That when we get a really heavy rainstorm, a fair amount of erosion happens from that. So the canopy slows it down, and then it drips down. Instead of coming from a half a mile up, it's coming from 30 feet up. And then the mid-level slow it down even more. And then when you finally get down to the low ground cover, it really can, all of that will absorb water, will keep the rain from hitting hard in those areas. So with that, any questions? We'll start here in the audience.
The pamphlet that you have on the native Maine plants, where's that available?
I honestly don't remember when I got it, but it came from Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens.
Okay.
So you could call them up and see if they still have it.
This presentation is being recorded, so you'll be able to go to our website and see it again. And what we'll do is we'll try to put references down on any of the materials that were used here, so that you'll be able to get access to it.
I tried to transplant some native ferns to a different location unsuccessfully. Is that not to be done, or is there a trick? Or?
That's a good question, and I've heard that before. She said she tried to transfer some ferns and didn't have good luck. So I'm not entirely sure what the problem is, but I have heard other people say that. And there may be a time of year that's better than another. But I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but.
I have some experience.
Oh.
I've tried that, and there's tons of different types of ferns.
Yeah.
And I found that you want to get similar habitat to similar habitat, whether it's slope or sun, and then also really get as much roots as you can. And then I think they reproduce by spores, so kind of how things are going to flow.
I assume they require a lot of watering afterwards.
Initially, I did. I didn't have trouble transplanting them. I had trouble getting them to spread. They spread where they don't spread where you want them to spread. They spread where they want to go.
So for those online who may not have been able to hear that, in trying to transplant them, it sounds like there's some challenges in doing that, but what you need to do is make sure that you're putting, there's many varieties of ferns, but you need to put them in the same kind of environment that you took them from, because they naturally selected that first site for whatever characteristics it had, whether it was shade or sun, and if you try to put it in a different place, it's less likely to survive. So did I answer that? Did I answer that, Sarah? Right?
Yes, it's true. It's absolutely true. But I'm not entirely sure where there was a problem.
Well, and I
There.
tried to put it underneath a tree, probably too close to the roots, and that was,
That could be an issue. Sometimes there are, like sumac, for instance, gives off a certain chemical that other plants, it deters other plants. They don't like it, which is really unusual. So it's possible that there was some problem with the root, chemically. I mean, I know that people try to transfer, like they try to dig up a lupin, which is almost impossible if it's mature. And you can dig them up when they're but they have this hugely long taproot, whereas ferns don't. But I'm not, and if you break the taproot, it will not survive. But so I'm not totally sure, because I don't do a lot of gardening with ferns. We have a ton that grow naturally.
Yeah.
But sorry.
We had a question here. Yes.
So you mentioned that there's so much more phosphorus given off on new construction. Is that because they automatically put lawns in with new construction? I mean, is there a way to do something about that?
The question is about new houses having a lot more phosphorus release than a wooded section. Some of it can be the lawns, but there's phosphorus in the soil. So anytime you disturb the soil, you're releasing phosphorus. It naturally occurs, but it's somewhat encapsulated in the soil until you dig it up. And so within the town of both Windham and Falmouth, there are requirements. If you're going to dig up more than 200 square feet of soil, you need to get a permit and to be able to do that. And there are certain things, if you're going to build a garage, for example, you would need to get a permit and you need to meet a certain number of points. It's a little different from each town, but it ends up being the same thing in the end. But you need to put in buffers and you need to put in ways of minimizing the runoff from this new impervious surface or this soil that you put up. So, but anytime the soil is disturbed, it opens up an opportunity for phosphorus to get in the lake. And with all the impervious surface that you see as a whole development goes in, all the roofs, all the driveways, the lawns are not as pervious as a wooded area. So all of that water starts to run off someplace, often creates gullies, which now is washing more soil in and bringing more phosphorus downstream. So it's the erosion and the exposure of soil more so, I think, than all the fertilizer that goes on it, but that certainly adds to it. Yes, sir.
Yes, with the shoreline along the north side of Highland Lake, where the prevailing wind, we get a terrific amount of erosion and also leaves and twigs every season, just kind of fills up.
Right.
So like a buffer with one of your images that had a kind of a stone, kind of a clean border right along the lake. I mean, where do you go for guidance about, what's acceptable as far as equipment and bringing materials there? And, it looks like they really significantly changed the shoreline of the lake.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, where do you go for guidance and recommendations on what's acceptable and how to, take on that type of project? I mean, they had to use small excavators or something to lift and move material.
So the question, if this speaker is very directional. So the question for people out online is, if you do have a lot of shoreline erosion from prevailing winds, et cetera, how do you go about trying to solve the erosion on your shorefront? And I would say, one, you can talk to people at the town, or we've got an excellent resource here in Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District. They can give you a lot of guidance on how to do that.
Yes.
And if you are going to hire a contractor, then you're going to need to get the appropriate permits, both from the DEP as well as the town. And it also makes sense to find a contractor who's certified to work in the shoreland zone, because they will know right away what they can and cannot do without getting you and them in trouble. And we have a couple of things that I'll just mention. It's not just the waves, but there's some issues with, I'm going beyond tonight's discussion, but much larger waves from boats, that wake boats has become an issue. And there's some education information out there that we'll be providing a little bit later. Ice has caused a lot of damage. This past winter, we saw a lot of times when it was 10 below one day and 50 degrees the next. And while most people don't recognize it, ice contracts and expands just like steel will do. If you've ever seen old steam lines, they have to put these loops in it. So when they get hot, they expand. Ice does too. And I live on the south end of the lake. For 1 degree Fahrenheit change in the ice, it expands 6 inches across the lake.
Wow.
On the length of the lake, it's closer to 2 feet. And so what happens is, if it gets really cold, it shrinks. And if it's grabbing onto the shore, it has to crack someplace. And right in the Narrows is a place where it will often open up in the wintertime. When it's cold, it'll crack and open up. The water comes into the crack, freezes, and then when it gets warm again, now it's starting from there, it expands out from there, and it will push up onto the shores. I know there's people on the north end of the lake who've had their rock walls destroyed. I've had big rocks like this move 14 inches over the winter time. So ice can cause a fair amount of damage too. So there's a lot of things that can cause shoreland erosion. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
On that note, on the ice note, we had a rough winter this winter,
We did.
like you said, freeze, thaw. The constant trying to keep up with that on your property, to keep it safe from slips and slides. The sand that you get from the towns has salt in it.
Right.
What are we supposed to do? It was exceptional. I was putting sand out constantly.
So the question is, with the kind of winter we had this year with snow, rain, freezing, because of the freezing, a lot of sand and salt ended up going on the roads and walkways. What do we do with that? Right now, most of the roads around the lake are private. So even though a number of the roads are plowed by the town and would be sanded by the town, but because they're private, they don't come back up and sweep up that sand. So that becomes an issue for the road associations, who my road association doesn't budget for that. We're all dirt road to begin with.
Right.
So it's not like you can just go sweep it up. So it's a challenge. And,
We can,
Great.
in the follow-up email that we send out after this, we have some resources with the town and the district on winter maintenance tips for application of sand and when to kind of put things down, potential ways to, take things back up, like in the spring or summertime. So we can send that out after as well for more of a document for you to refer to.
But I thought, if I may, weren't you more worried about the salt than the sand?
The salt, because that will wash into the lake. So,
Yeah. So,
I would offer, probably the best thing to do is to reach out to Cumberland County and the towns to get some guidance on that. I personally don't have the expertise to know, and if Ally, if you'd like to respond to that, maybe you could come here so the speaker could pick you up, or have them call you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Allie. I'm from the Cumberland County Soil Water Conservation District. Been told to move this way for the camera. If you ever have questions about like shoreland issues, erosion issues, the chloride issues, our office has lots of resources. Probably the biggest thing is going to be trying to buy your own sand that doesn't have the salt mixed into it, which then puts, of course, the responsibility on you because you can't just use the free municipal product, which is unfortunate. But that would be one of the steps. And then the other thing is that there are kind of alternatives and other methods that you can use to reduce the amount of ice that's kind of on your yard or on your driveway. Some of it can be fixing drainage that's on your yard. That happens like in the non-winter seasons, fixing drainage issues in your yard so that then in the wintertime, the drainage doesn't freeze in areas where you don't want it, things like that. So it can be a couple different methods or techniques that you can use to kind of reduce the reliance and need for sand and salt on your property. So our office would be happy to help if you have a like very site specific question, or if you're just looking for information in general, we'll send that out to everyone, people in person and everybody that's attending through the webinar. We have a very long list at this point of resources that we're going to be sending out to you all in a follow-up email. So be looking for that later this week. That help answer your question?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Kevin,
Well,
Kevin, do we have?
What's the suggested best plan for 100% shade area? Maybe a repeat question.
So a question online is, what's the best plant for 100% shaded area?
Well, that depends on a lot of factors. The best plant for shade depends on if you're looking for a ground cover or a perennial or a shrub or a tree. They're all plants. So it depends on a lot of factors, a lot of decisions regarding how wet it is, whether it's on a slope, how dry it is, what soil type you have.
About ground cover.
Ground cover, again, it depends on whether you have sun or shade. I mean, we listed a couple in
Shade. Full
shade. Okay. I think that probably the tea berry is a great one. It's easy. You just, getting a ground cover established is no easy feat by any means. But it's, I would start there maybe. And whoever's asking, I would advise them to go to a really good nursery, any one of the ones that were listed here and that sell ground covers. So get some advice from those people too. Because they could describe the site and get some help there. But it's a really good choice, that one, the Gaultheria procumbens. So.
Kevin, were there any other questions online?
Mostly about putting the presentation online.
Okay. Are there any other questions here? Okay, well, hey, on behalf of the Highland Lake Leadership Team and the Highland Lake Association, thank you so much for participating tonight, and also certainly to Sarah for being our keynote speaker, and the rest of the team that's helped put this together. So thanks very much for coming.
Oh, that was wonderful. Yes, great.
All right.